Hi guys, this is Nick Christopher from Mob Tales again. Hope you guys are all doing well. Thank you for checking in. Thank you for the comments some of you guys have made already, which is awesome. We do have a special guest today for the first time, David Iacovetti from Florida, a state I would love to move to eventually. Uh, he has a very interesting background, and his dad was a major player in the life, and we're going to cover some of that information in a little bit. So I just want to first welcome Dave to the show. Thank you very much for taking your time out and being my very first guest.
Wow, thank you. It's an honor, Nick.
I thank you for as much, just as much. I want to start first. Maybe you can give the list of viewers a little bit of a background on yourself to let people know, a little bit more.
Okay, so my claim to fame is being a writer, producer, and luckily I've been able to be an actor and an extra on some great movies over the years growing up here in Miami. Scarface, I was in on Absence of Malice with Paul Newman and Sally Field. I got to be part of that when they shot here in Miami. Porky's was another great movie from the 80s that I was in. And I got to work in radio and then moved into television. And now that's my mainstay is television production, writing books. But a lot of that I can attribute to being the son of my father. And my father was a very big entrepreneur all in his own right. He collaborated in Tony Roma's being opening and turned into a restaurant chain in the 70s. He also collaborated and did Bobby Rubino's, and he had several other businesses that I helped him with some of them, and he had other partners in. But prior to that, I mean, he had been listed as one of the top organized crime members in the country. He was closely aligned with Carlo Gambino and Neil Delacroix and those guys from that era. But it was when it was the Anastasia family. It was before before Carlo Gambino took over, and then my father got grandfathered in. But that's an incredible story itself, how that happened, and from what my father told me, and I could tell you more about that too if you wanted to hear it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, your father was known as Fat Dave, correct?
Correct. Well, that was the government name that stuck. But the guys in New York, they called my father Davey Crockett, like Davey Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, because my father would go on boats to the islands. He would jump on a plane and go to Miami. And back then, those guys in Brooklyn, that was like far off other side of the world stuff for a lot of those guys. So Davey Crockett was his nickname, but then the government started, seeing him in places, and he became close friends with Frank Sinatra, and attention came on him, and they'd be asking these different people, these informants around the country, yeah, Fat Dave Iacovetti, so it stuck. But yeah, I prefer the Davey Crockett nickname myself. I think he did too. He kind of got a laugh out of the Fat Dave handle, but he was a great guy. I mean, I'm so honored not only to have him as my father, but to have been his friend and got to be around him, and the type of people that he associated with, I mean, were the top of the top, whether it be mob guys or politicians or actors. I mean, he ran with Frankie Sinatra and Jilly Rizzo and the Rat Pack guys, all of them. I got to meet Frank Sinatra. He was going to have me come work for him in Las Vegas, but my father wasn't having it. He goes, no, you're working for me right here.
Well, you mentioned, well, I know that your dad was well connected with with Joey Armone, Piney Armone is what they called him.
Piney, yeah, Joe
Piney was a big shot. He was a small time.
No, but my father knew them all, Nick. I didn't know growing up, and even in my 20s, I didn't really get it. I knew he was somebody. But looking back now, I mean, his friends were all the bosses. I mean, Carlo, Piney was like a, number 3, number 4 man
Right.
back in those times. even Joe Valachi talked about my father. That's how my father first came on the radar, is when Joe Valachi started testifying and naming names and who was it with who. But Raymond Patriarca out of Boston, another classy guy you don't hear a lot about, because those guys didn't want attention. By the time the new generation took over in the late 80s there, you know, my dad was pretty much pushing 80 years old, you know. He just wanted to stay home and cook for his friends and go fishing on his boats. But when they went after Gotti, they went after anybody close to him, and that's when they nailed my father. And how they got my father was a guy would come by. He didn't really know him that well, and he just kind of felt sorry for the guy. So he's always cooking, you know, he'd let him sit around, and it was a mistake, because eventually the government paid that guy 50 grand to testify that my father had told him that he was a member of the Gambino family. Wow. And so and because of that testimony, my father was convicted. You know, there was other things on the case, but that's what cinched the deal. And my father was like, why would I ever say anything like that? Why? I would never. And they didn't have him on tape saying it. They had this guy's testimony saying it. So right. no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah. Didn't he run a company called Ocean International, where he shipped like seafood and stuff like that?
Okay, so Ocean International were these guys from Rhode Island, Long Island, I'm not sure. A guy named Louis Fiola. He was like a kickboxing champion, a state kickboxing champion. And those guys subleased a property within a cold storage complex that my father set up. He was so happy. He had an Italian gourmet store in the front with a retail fish market with every kind of fish you could imagine. The planes were coming every day from New York, wherever. They were bringing lobsters and other things, and the boats, we were going to the boats and picking up. But Louis Fiola, however you pronounce his last name, he came off as a tough guy, and my dad never did. You know, my dad was like the most subtle guy. I mean, you would notice him, but not because of him running his yap. You would just notice him because the look that he always had, you know. Most of those guys have it. So evidently he didn't do his homework with Ocean International. So they leased the part of my father's property, and they were bringing in all these swordfish. Turns out they were bringing in Uzis inside the stomachs of these swordfish.
Wow.
And not only that, we found that out later. My father and I didn't know anything about it. I was working there at the time for him. And they didn't pay their rent. They owed 10 grand. And so my father, I wasn't there, but I heard this story from a good friend of his, Robert DiAgostino, who's from up in the Mass area, old timer, great guy. But he was there, and he goes, your dad goes in to collect, and these guys say, hey, you don't know who you're messing with. We're with the Massachusetts families, and you better take your Jewish butt back out of here if you know what's good for you. Because my dad, a lot of people thought he was Jewish, you know.
You don't look
and Jewish. I get the same thing when I wear glasses for some reason. So my father went back out, and he told Robert what they said. Robert said, what are you going to do? And my father said, these hands reach around the world. And he made some phone calls, and Raymond, from what I understand, Raymond Patriarca Jr. himself got on the plane the next day. He came and saw those guys, and they paid the money.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, with yourself, like you said, you helped your father out, but did you ever dabble in that world at all?
You know, I did.
I know you got in trouble at one time, I know.
Yeah. So what happened was, before the last time I saw my father, from the time I was 6 years old till the time I was 14, when he got out of the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary after serving whatever that is, what is that, 6 to 14, and 8 years, was by candlelight. A hurricane had hit Miami, and he came to see me. It was my birthday. He brought me a gun set, and he brought me one of those dart boards, but the professional, real sportsman dart boards. And my mother wasn't having it. He's too young. He'll put his eye out, So he kept the dart board. I was really upset about that. And then I didn't get to see him again until I was 14. I talked to him on the phone once, but I didn't get to see him in person until I was 14. So I was learning about him by going to the library and reading these books about him and Vincent Teresa, and back in the day of the Irish-Italian mob wars in
Boston. Yeah.
yeah, in Boston, and how, my father was involved with helping Raymond with that and something, and, I don't know, but he was really close to Carlo, and he had a lot of respect. He one of the books I read about it told the story of how Vincent Teresa wrote it, My Life in the Mafia by Vincent Teresa. And he said that basically that my father and him, the first time they ever had a taste of taking over a city, it was in Baltimore. They all got sent down to Baltimore by Carlo and the guys, and it was to take over Baltimore. They already had some people there, but these were the cavalry showing up. So they get to Baltimore, and they're in one of these high-rise hotels. And those guys, they're all dripping in diamonds and watches and PJs and long jeans and all these beautiful jewelry. And all of a sudden, my father said he looks out the window and the whole block had been surrounded. It was like they thought they had legs of diamond there. And the whole Baltimore Police Department comes up and they arrest my father and all his friends there for stolen jewelry. Their jewelry. But these guys don't got no receipts on them to show. It was just a reason to get him down to the jail. And when they got him to the jail, the police captain came in and he goes, "You go back and tell your boss, Carlo, Baltimore is taken." And my father went back to Baltimore. I don't know what happened with all that, but I know they didn't leave Baltimore for a long time after that. But so I was reading all these different stories, and as a 14-year-old kid, my mom thought I'd be at school. I was out putting things together. I was getting credit card numbers and had people working for me, and we were ordering things. I ordered like gold and jewelry and bicycles, you name it, because back then they didn't check the credit cards like they do now. So I had this guy, he's called Larry the Garbage Man, and he would go out and get these carbons from the old-timey credit card machines where they would run them off.
Yep.
And then but on the telephone, they'd just take the number and run it. And if you weren't in that book, and that book only came out once a week, and nobody would even know I had the number, so they wouldn't report the card stolen. So I was racking up a lot of money. And I thought I was something. I was on Washington Avenue in Miami Beach, and I had like these two bodybuilder guys that worked out at the gym next to where my mom was working. And I'd give them $50 a week just to look over my shoulder for me, so nothing happened to me, But then I got crazy, and it all became not really real. It was strange how to explain it. But then I started up in my game, so to speak, and I impersonated an IRS agent. And I went around as an IRS agent collecting people's back taxes they did not owe. And at some point, they caught on to it. I was mainly targeting a certain area. I knew that if you lived on Indian Creek Drive up in the 60s on Miami Beach, you had money usually. And those are the people, older people, I'm not proud of it, but I did it, and I collected another 50 grand. Now, at 14 years old, that kind of money goes right to your head,
Wow.
And my mother's like, where's all this coming from? I go, yeah, my dad's sending it to me. She didn't know. She didn't know if I was getting it from him or not. They didn't talk that much after I got older. So what happened was these people finally caught on, and they put together a task force with the Miami Beach Police Department, Metro-Dade Police. The Secret Service was involved because of the credit cards, and Social Security sent special investigators, and they're looking for this group of people. And I could change my voice at that age. I could sound like an old Spanish guy. I could sound like a woman. I could sound like a different guy. And I remember one time at the height of that, when I could feel they were going to catch me, it was just starting to dawn on me that you can't just keep going. I was on a payphone, and down at the Fontainebleau, they used to have this bank of payphones there. And I was talking like a woman to one of the people I was trying to get money from. And there was like 8 payphones on each side of this little hallway. And at the end of the hallway was a woman, and she was just happened to get on the phone. And all of a sudden, while I'm talking, 3 cops come running this way, 2 cops come running that way. They go right by me and they grab this woman and they drag her off screaming and kicking because they thought she was, you know, so I knew it was a matter of time before I got caught. And then sooner or later they did. They came down on me with shotguns and undercover police, and they nailed me right as I was leaving the bank with one woman's money.
And you were how old at that time?
14.
Really, that young?
Yeah.
Wow. So you had your father's street smarts, basically.
I did. And my father had just come home from Atlanta Penitentiary, and he had nothing whatsoever to do with it. And I go to see him, and I met him at one of his restaurants, Flora's Pizza on 79th Street in Miami. Still there. It's a different name now. And I'm showing him the gold coins, and I got imported pistachios from Iran, and I'm giving him a big bag of them. And he's like, he goes, oh no, he goes, what's going on here, you know? And later when I got arrested, I made the front pages of the Miami paper, most of the Florida papers. And then he had friends that saw it in New York and LA, and they were calling him up going, hey, that kid's a regular chip off the old block, Dave. But my father said, son, you scare me. He goes, if I had been innocently driving down the street and saw you walking from the bank that day and said, son, get in the car, I'll give you a ride. He goes, the police would have never believed I wasn't part of that. And I would have got him, you know, got him.
So what was your father's reaction when you got pinched?
He kind of laughed, and then he goes, son, you're going to have to learn how to make money the correct way. You're going to earn it. You're going to work for it. You know, I mean, because again, well, he was away. So it was my mom on her own struggling during that time. So when I hit the payola and I was getting, you know, I could get on the phone. I was ordering Omaha steaks every week. I was sending her 2 dozen roses like 3 times a week, you know, all on these other people's credit cards. You lose touch with, you know, how much money that really is, you know, how hard you would have to work at a regular job to get it. But yeah, so I had to go into a program, and then it was all expunged when I was 18. So that taught me my lesson, you know.
So were you supposed to did you serve time for that, or you were?
I had to go into, well, I was in jail during the trial and everything, but they dropped most of the charges. They hit me with 3 counts of extortion and 3 counts of grand theft. But then they gave me a plea offer of just, you know, admit that I was the only one involved, which I was. I mean, I had a few friends helping me here and there, but they didn't know what you know, they weren't aware of so it wasn't really a conspiracy or nothing. And then I had to go into this program for criminally minded teenagers. And boy, that was a movie all to itself. Trust me when I tell you. Yeah. But so I completed that, and then they expunged my record. So other than Miami Herald stories from that year, 1978, nobody knows about it. But it'll make a hell of a movie, you know, this 14-year-old kid in the 70s.
Yeah, really.
So I'm gonna turn that into a film at some point. I just have so much on my plate with documentaries. I've got the book on my dad I wrote, Fat Dave, Capo, which is on Amazon, and then I've got another one, Dr. Minch, and I'm working with some guys from New York who may turn that into a series as well. But that's a fiction.
The one about your dad is called Silent Partner, right?
Correct. I wrote that 3 years ago. And when I wrote it, a good friend of mine who's a producer, also Ciro DiPaggio, did a series called Silent Partners, shot a pilot. He got a bunch of the guys, Gary Pastore, Joe D'Onofrio from Bronx Tale, and they made a great pilot. And so the book went to #1 in organized crime on Amazon Kindle. It beat out Pablo Escobar's biography that came out the same time. Beat him for a minute, but Pablo caught up to us. But we were there. We were there for a minute. So I'm going to put out a couple of more in that genre of books. And then I've got a couple of documentaries that were shot or we're in post on, or we're gonna shoot, that we're gonna be putting out also. And then the biggest project of all is, you know, it was a hobby on and off for many years, but now it's come to life, is Club TV. And that's basically a 24-hour music channel like MTV used to be when they played music videos. We do the same thing they used to do before they abandoned that format, but we also add club performances from some of the greats from the 80s till now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. It's 24 hours a day broadcasting, but eventually it'll be similar to TikTok. You'll be able to go in there and upload your own content and so forth. So I'm excited. It's a great time of my life right now.
Well, if you were to, like, you know, your views, your vision, not vision, but your opinion rather, on the life. I know it's changed a lot since the time that you were around with your dad. Obviously, tremendous difference. What would your take be on the life now and what it was when you were around your dad?
Well, back then your word meant a lot. I mean, if a guy gave his word, depending on who he was, I mean, no contract would be stronger than that. And that don't exist anymore. I mean, even in writing, it don't really mean nothing anymore, you know. In business, you have a lot of people that they're looking to steal legally, basically, you know, so you got to be careful and you got to watch everything. And I think that's where the mob, my opinion of where it's at now, what's left of it, is they've either gone legitimate or quasi-legitimate, or they're just straight up scamming people and they know what they're doing. You know what I mean? It's a racket for some guys. I know some guys that they go in and they get out and they got a whole other investment thing going on, you know? Right. So it makes it harder. You know, it's hard. Stealing money is probably pretty easy. It was for me back in the day when I was on that tip. Making money legitimately and keeping hold of it, that's the hard part. That's really hard. But I think it changed a long time ago. I think it changed back around the early 90s. And something about that honor that was in that life just went away. And it only left, you know, the remnants of it. Right. But you don't see anything like a Neil Delacroix or Carlo Gambino, guys like my dad or Joe Paterno, you know, you don't see them anymore.
That's true. That's true. Well, based on that fact, you were around, you know, were around a lot of those guys. Now,
oh, yeah.
Your dad passed, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, he did in 98. Natural causes in his own bed, which
now,
few of them do.
Now, did your dad ever persuade you not to get involved in the life?
Oh, yeah. No, he made it very clear that he didn't want me to be part of that. And his friends would even say things at dinner I'd be at sometimes, and my father would stop him right in the, today, yo, my son is not part of this, you know. And
did you do, but that he said that like when you were at that age, like I said, you're 14, you got pinched, right? So
yeah,
was he afraid that you were thinking to get involved in that world?
Yeah, I mean, he could see that I could go, you know, down that wrong path. But again, that's why Frank Sinatra was such a big part of my life. I looked at him as the ultimate godfather. To me, he was the godfather because nobody was going to knock at his door at 5 a.m. and haul him out of his bed and put him in jail. And he did it his way, you know. So the entertainment business luckily caught my eye. And then at 18, I got to be on Scarface. At 16, I was on Porky's. So I caught the entertainment bug. Now, when I got older, there was a couple of times where I had to help my dad. And I came very close to that life again. And this was like 92, 91, 89. So he wasn't around. So in a way, just by being there for him, I was Johnny on the spot. I just didn't have all the backup. A lot of people would know who I was, and they would, because of that reason, not bother me. But some people just didn't care. And those are the ones I had to have. I was packing, I had a shotgun in the trunk, a pistol in the glove box. I mean, I was looking out the window all the time. And I wasn't a mob guy, but I was dealing with those guys, people who were. And not all of them were in my dad's corner. So at one point I was contacted by the FBI and told there was a contract on my life from one of the crime families out of New York, and if I wanted to tell them all about it, they could help me. And I looked at the special agent supervisor. He said a special agent supervisor from New York had notified him at the Miami office, and he had to come see me. He drove to the restaurant when I was running it for my dad, and I met him out back. And he goes, but if you come over to us and you tell us everything you know, we might can help you. And I said, come over. What are you talking about? I'm selling pasta, man. You're the FBI. You tell me what's going on.
So basically, you never. So in other words, you never crossed the line, basically.
I didn't, but I did have problems with those guys. It was like being across the line, but without having the badge or the button or whatever.
Yeah.
Because
what I mean by cross the line, I mean cross the line, I mean you never like worked for the government, so to speak. You never went over there.
No,
right.
no.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No, I told him. I said, listen. I said, I'm not going to wear a wire or anything like that. I said, but if 3 guys show up in the middle of the night and try to kill me, you're going to be the first guy I call. But the funny thing was, a few months later, guys did show up in the middle of the night. They damn near almost killed me and my fiance. But by the grace of God, we got out of there. And when I called the guy to tell him, he never answered back, the special agent supervisor. And I was thinking, man, that's kind of weird. And then I pick up the newspaper, probably 6 months after I had met the guy. And it said, Miami FBI special agent supervisor arrested for selling names of informants to the mob.
Wow, that's crazy.
And they said another agent was arrested in New York, another special agent supervisor. So if I had been like, yeah, I'll tell you everything, get the wires. I would have been,
forget about it.
I didn't even have to worry about the bad guys anymore. Now these guys would take care of
the good guys sometimes. Yeah, forget it. But if you were to tell us a little bit, really quick before we put the show to bed, tell us what would you like people to know about Dave Iacovetti? What things would you like people to check out so they can know more about the stuff that you're putting out?
Yeah, well, I'd like them to read the book about my dad. I tell it from a son's standpoint. I don't go into where bodies are buried, which I wouldn't know anyway. But it's a different angle about my father. And then when you know who he was and who his friends were, you can understand who I'm aspiring to be. I want to be, a late blooming Quentin Tarantino. I want to make some killer movies, some killer documentaries, write a few more killer books, and be on some awesome shows like yours, Nick.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But where can people find, can you tell us where can people find your book and where they can check out Club TV?
Absolutely. We have our own URL channel, which, like I said, we broadcast from 24 hours a day. Some clubs feed us right into their video monitors when they're open, and you can see it live in the club. But otherwise, if you're having a birthday party, you could even put us on in the background. And you go to www.clubtv.me, clubtv.me, and there it is. You can watch the feed, you can subscribe, you can get more involved. And as far as the books go, if you just put in my name, Dave Iacovetti, and Amazon Kindle, it'll bring up the books that I have out now, and there'll be a few more coming. But like my father used to say, don't tell me what you're going to do, son. Show me.
Show me. Yeah, good point. Very good
I'm
point.
still doing it. I'm still showing people. I got more to come. Keith, stay tuned.
Sounds good. Dave, I really appreciate you coming on. It was great talking to you. I'm going to check out the stuff myself because I'm curious. I still have to get your book. Like last time when we met in LA, I've been meaning to go get it. I've been fucking crazy doing my own shit.
I
So,
understand. You can download it though. You can get the digital version too, right there at
oh no,
Kindle.
I'm old school. I got to look at pages. I can't.
I'll get you a copy, send it out to you.
I appreciate that.
All right, my brother.
Well,
Thank you for
Dave.
having me on.
No, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. God bless. Good luck.
You too. Well, this is Greg, Nick Christopher from Mob Tales. We'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We'd like to thank Davey Crockett for taking his time. And we'll check you guys on soon. Please leave a comment or like, share the show so everybody can take a look. Thank you.